This podcast is a quest for well-being, a quest for a meaningful life through the exploration of fundamental truth. Enlightening ideas, insights on physical, mental, and spiritual health. The inspiration is love. The aspiration is to awaken new ways of thinking that can lead us to a new way of being well. Welcome to Body, Mind, and Soul Healing Conversations.
You may be daunted by the thought of rescuing a marriage that feels like it's on its last legs. However, don't give up. Hold out hope that you can put in the work with the tools you need to save your flailing marriage. When your partner is pulling away and making it more difficult to communicate, that's when we employ our patented push-pull technique. When you feel like you've tried everything, there's still hope. Is it possible your existing tactics are actually pushing your partner away from you? Think about the ways you communicate with your partner and the things you say. Do you often threaten to leave? What about taking away your kids, pets, things that are precious to your partner? Do you hold idle threats over your partner's head to try to get him or her to see your reasoning? This could be harmful to your marriage. Valeria interviews international marriage experts Mark Johnston and Heather Choate. They help save marriages where one spouse is checked out of the relationship. Their proven step-by-step system is designed to help you reconnect with your spouse quickly and create the thriving marriage you crave. Whether you need to improve communication, restore trust, deepen intimacy, or renew commitment, High Thrive Coaching will help you get there fast and guide you on how to make those changes last. Life is short and time is precious. Above all, you and your marriage are worth it. Grab the free 60-second plan to reconnect with your spouse now, so your spouse will want to be with you again. Heather Choate had to fight for her life when she was diagnosed with breast cancer while pregnant at age 29. This experience gave her a new perspective on life and marriage. Both her and her husband had to rely upon a bedrock foundation of trust, support, faith, tenacity, and persistence to survive and protect the life of their baby while keeping their marriage intact. Heather understands the raw, day-to-day struggles couples face, having dealt with depression, anxiety, illness, and a lack of solid communication in marriage, and teaches people how to build a foundation of unconditional love for themselves and their spouse. Over the past 12 years, Mark Johnston has helped hundreds of clients make real changes in their lives. Now, as one of the founders of High Thrive Coaching, he is able to share some of his secrets to success on a much larger platform. Mark has helped clients save their marriages, improve their communication, overcome addiction, move beyond abusive relationships, and more. After a spectacular failure and nearly losing everything, Mark has learned how to use failures in relationships and life as tools to springboard to success. Here is the interview with Heather Choate and Mark Johnston.
In your own words, who is Heather Choate and who is Mark Johnston?
That's a really broad question to start off with, but I'll get going there. So for me, myself, who I am, I identify as many things. I think, primarily my priorities in life are as a husband and as a father. But, that's probably not why I am here for the interview today. well, maybe in some ways, but a lot of what I do just in general is, I'm an international marriage coach. I help a lot of people all over the world. Basically, right now, anywhere that speaks English, so we'll be expanding on that. I help people save desperate marriages. It's a really challenging work, but I like that challenge, and I think that's a big part of who I am. I really like to look at really difficult situations and examine them from a lot of different angles and see what can be done about that. And that's really driven me quite a bit in my life.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm so honored to be here, and I'm just honored for everyone listening. I just really believe that we have incredible opportunity to learn and grow and heal together. So thank you, Valeria, for having us.
Thank you.
So I am a mother of 8 children.
Wow.
And I just had our 8th baby here in January. So I'm a busy mama, especially during, at the time we're recording this, it's during COVID-19. So I've got all the little ones home with me. Yeah. And I am a wife to my amazing husband, Ben. We've been married 14 years. And we've gone through some really challenging times. Personally, I was diagnosed with breast cancer at the age of 29 while I was pregnant with our 6th baby. And going through that experience, having doctors tell me I needed to abort the baby to save my life, but choosing to keep the baby, even at the risk of my own life, looking at potential end of my life, which is something I never expected, just really transformed things for me. It changed my total perspective on the way I view the world. And I realized, I'm just not who I really want to be. I'm not doing the things I really feel like I'm here on this earth to do. And so I decided in that moment, time is so short. I need to make some of these changes now. And going through that experience really instilled a hunger in me to help other people and to not let life defeat us. We have so many challenges that are thrown at us that sometimes we can just become completely overwhelmed by them. So I just had hunger in my heart to help people overcome their challenges and couples to reconnect, to save their marriage, especially if they're facing divorce, and to face challenges together, because I believe that we can become better and stronger through our challenges. And that is my mission now and my heart's desire. So I'm honored to be here. Thank you.
How wonderful. Thank you. I have a few warm-up questions before we talk about the 60-second plan to reconnect with your spouse method that is connected to the Path Marriage Coaching Program. So my first warm-up question to either of you is, what is life? What do you think life is?
That's once again, another broad question there with, what life is. Well, for me, what life is there's, so much to it. There's so many experiences out there. And I think, a big thing about life is kind of our duty to get out there and experience as much of it as possible. Now, certainly there's a lot of things out there that are certainly not healthy or not are going to detract from things. But I think, part of the process of life just is figuring that out and figuring out where we sit in that whole process. But, we could probably talk for hours just on this subject.
True.
Yeah. But, if I had to sum it up, I'd say it's that.
Right. What do you think the opposite of life is, Heather?
Well, the thing that came to my mind about what life is, to answer that one first, would be a journey where we get to learn and grow and progress, an opportunity to become better than we were and to experience things, right? The opposite of that would be anything that takes away from life, would be getting stuck in where you are instead of progressing and not learning from what you're doing. To me, that's just surviving. And one thing that Mark and I really focus on is not just to survive challenges in life and life itself, but to truly thrive, to get outside your comfort zone, to continue to learn, to continue to progress. There's a philosophy that says that if you're not progressing, if you're not moving forward, then you're digressing, and that's actually death. In my own life, the opposite of life and love would be fear and inaction. And so anything that keeps you stuck in fear or inaction would be the opposite of life, in my opinion. You might be living like your heart's beating, right? But you're
Yes.
like a zombie or a robot. And I can raise my hand and be like, I've been there myself, though. I know what that feels like to just go through the motions and feel like a zombie versus truly thriving, progressing, helping other people as well.
I love that. It resonates very much true to me. Mark, what is the meaning of freedom to you?
Well, freedom, I think a lot of people would take a look at freedom and they would say it's the ability to do what you want to do. But I think there's much more to it. Essentially, it would boil down to that. It's about choice. I think a lot when I talk to my clients, so in my business, I talk to a lot of people who are having these really super scary, super hard marriage problems. And sometimes the complaint comes up about, not having enough freedom here. And what they talk about, what it really ends up boiling down to is they talk about feeling constrained, not being able to, especially in the vein you were asking about life, not being able to live that life. And so I think, if we're talking about what freedom is, it is that ability to be able to get out there and to experience how you would want to. Certainly in my realm, there is some need to limit some of that freedom if you are needing to, consider the needs of other people, in a relationship. But, if we're just talking about pure freedom, it's about choice.
Possibilities, right? Being able to see that, right?
Absolutely.
Heather, at this time, what is the world's greatest need, in your opinion? And what is your vision for a new world?
I love that. All right. So we can only control ourselves, right? And I think that when people think about the world and a vision for the world, we often start to think about external things, governments, policies, big world events, global transformation and global healing. And what it really comes down to for me personally is that that has to come within us first. And we need to shift our focus from what we can't control, which would be governments, economies, policies, right? All these big, massive things.
Right.
Instead, putting our energy into what we can control. And if each of us goes deep into our own healing, right? Healing those limiting beliefs that are keeping us stuck, holding us back, bringing us pain, oftentimes year after year after year. And I'm the first to say, yes, I've been there, I've done that, and I know what that is like. But when we can each heal those things inside of ourselves, then we can show up better and stronger in our marriage and better and stronger in all of our relationships and the world. So I think if each of us took responsibility for the only thing that we can control, which is ourselves, and we found that healing and that peace within us and found true happiness that we can experience in this life, it doesn't mean it's always going to be like perfectly blissful, but that we are able to, navigate through the challenges of life with a sense of serenity and a sense of peace and a sense of inner calm, because we know that we stand in our own power, right? Rather than giving our power to other things. I think that's where change and transformation really has to come from. And that's my mission, is to help as many people as possible achieve that. And if more and more people achieve that, then we're going to see the ripple effect in our results on a global scale.
I'd like to chime in just, my 2 cents on this as well. After seeing so many couples come our way, or just relationships, I think what's really needed is a lot more understanding and acceptance. I see those big problems that Heather was mentioning, politics and governments, and I see so much contention, like these people are right, these people are wrong, and where these people need to be, we're going to deal with them only because of what they can provide for us. And I think a lot of that would be solved, either on a big scale or even just on a personal scale, if there was a lot more time taken to consider things from their perspective. I think a lot of people, when you take the time to, just put yourself in their shoes, oftentimes many perspectives make sense from a certain point of view.
Yeah, I love the word you use, understanding. Yeah, that's so important and needed. And I absolutely love your wisdom, Heather. Everything starts with us, right? Self-knowledge, self-awareness, self-love. So my next question to Mark, what is another word for marriage?
Let's see. Another word for marriage. I think it's, we could probably put a lot of synonyms in here. I think a good way to describe it would be a union. I think marriage, a good, healthy marriage, is very much about cooperation. It's about mutual respect and mutual understanding. And, I think, that word right there, a union, it very much, kind of communicates that idea across the board. And, it's quite often when, it is going poorly, a marriage, that a lot of that cooperative nature or that collaborative nature just seems to go away. And people start to focus a little bit more on what they're getting out of things when it really starts to go south. So yeah, I think union would be a really great word to substitute marriage.
Right. What is love to you, Heather?
I love love.
Oh boy, tell me about it.
Oh, I'm so sappy. But okay, so for me, and what I've experienced in my own marriage, as well as working with thousands of couples now, really getting into the heart of what romantic love is. We have familial love, we have friendship type love, right? So there's all these different meanings that people bring to the word love, right? And when I say this word, you probably have your own idea of what it really is. So for me, in romantic love and marriage love, one of the coolest things I've been experiencing over these last 14 years is what I call like the 3 levels of love. So just bear with me for a minute here as I walk through this, because I think it really helps clarify a lot of confusion about romantic love specifically and what marriage type love is between, a couple. And you have at first your infatuation stage. And this is where you're like head over heels in love, right? You're floating on cloud 9. You just can't get enough with this person. It's that really high feeling that we get of just totally over the moon for this person. And if we think about it, it's actually kind of a selfish form of love. It's not a bad kind of love. Like there's no bad love. But it's kind of about me and like what this person makes me feel. And we have oftentimes a perception, a lot of people do, that this kind of love is what's going to last throughout all of the marriage. And the reality is it doesn't. We'll have moments of this kind of love, but something else deeper needs to take a place inside the relationship in order for it to really last. The next level would be what we call contractual. And this is like the give take type love. It means I'll do this for you if you do this for me. This is where a lot of our expectations kind of come in. And for me, it was like, my husband needs to be a good provider for me and be faithful to me. And, that's my expectation. And I need to do this for him. And the problem with this stage, and this is where most marriages reside, and unfortunately where most marriages kind of end, is that if we feel like our partner isn't giving us enough, then we start to withhold from our partner. We're saying, okay, well, you're not keeping up your end of the bargain, so I'm not going to keep up my end of the bargain. And we become like, it's just very confrontational, and it's very exhausting to try to constantly measure if we're both holding up our end of the bargain, right? But that's where most people think like marriage is and love is. But the third level of love, which is the highest and ultimate level of love, is unconditional love. And I think that's probably what you're asking. Oh, sorry for me. So the ultimate level of love is unconditional love. And that means I love you no matter what. I love you just as you are. You don't need to be anything. You don't need to do anything. I just love you. And that is a form of love that I didn't think we could experience in marriage. I thought it was a fairy tale. I didn't think it was real until I was not living up to what I thought I needed to be to deserve love. I wasn't being the good wife because I was sick. I couldn't take care of the kids. I couldn't even take care of myself. I was not physically attractive. I was bald. I was pregnant and I had lost a breast. Like I felt the opposite of beautiful, right? And my husband loved me anyway. And he stood by me anyway. And he showed me this beautiful form of love that I hope that everyone can experience in life. It is true and it's real and it's actually a choice. Each of us can choose to see another being and be like, you're not perfect, I'm not perfect, but I choose to love you anyway.
Wow. That made me think about another question. Most people say that it's not possible to love other people unconditionally unless you love yourself unconditionally. So your husband, he already loved himself unconditionally, or he, in a way, taught himself to love unconditionally by giving unconditional love?
Yeah, I honestly think it goes both ways. I think that the more we love ourselves unconditionally, that allows us to open our heart to love others. It absolutely is true. However, we don't have to love ourselves perfectly because we're imperfect beings, right? There's always going to be something about ourselves that we're like, oh, I could do a little better on that. But I can still give myself some grace. I can still give myself some forgiveness, and knowing that that is unconditional love to yourself, right? Is giving yourself that ability to fail, that ability to not measure up to whatever preconceived notion we need to measure up to, right? But the more that we truly do learn to just I love myself as I am. I love myself flawed. I love myself imperfect. I love myself, messy bun hair day. The more we do that, then the more we're able to give that kind of grace, that compassion. And like Mark teaches here, a lot of understanding to others as well.
That is such a deep and wonderful message, unconditional love, right? So let's talk about your work. What was the inspiration and intention of creating the 60-second plan to reconnect with your spouse that is connected to the Path Marriage Coaching Program?
I guess, I'm going to pull back the curtain on that a little bit. Just like any business, we have to find some way to catch people's attention. And I think with things like this, like a 60-second method, that sounds like, okay, well, how can you actually reconnect in that amount of time? Especially if there's been problems and whatnot. But, Heather and I, we really like a good challenge. And, I certainly think there is a huge amount of ability to really connect in just a short amount of time. In terms of, what that actually, looks like. Much like I was talking about earlier, I can see huge walls come down within a relationship and lots of openness happen, even between people who have a lot of tension in the relationship, simply by inserting some, what I was talking about earlier, that understanding. When that tension starts to rise up and those problems start to drive people apart, the last thing that people start to expect is for that person that they feel all this tension with to really take the time to listen, to fight from their corner, to actually support them. And you'd be amazed at how quickly some of these situations can turn around by just noticing what's going on with your partner and asking some questions about it. Which it seems so simple. Like you actually need to notice your partner and ask some questions, but for some reason that escapes a lot of people, and no one really gets into a marriage. Very, very few people get into marriage with any sort of formal training. Like, how do you actually navigate serious problems within a long-lasting relationship? And so, this is almost always one of the first things that I start with my clients with is, how to take the pain that your partner is expressing and really turn that into some understanding and some connection.
Wow. Yeah, Heather mentioned earlier the word compassion. So do you connect these two words, compassion and understanding? Are they the same?
I guess if I really had to dig into it, I would say like an understanding is more a logical sort of word, but I wouldn't say that's really where we're aiming. And now that you're we're, really picking apart the words here, I do think that compassion is probably a closer definition of what we're aiming for. Because, I might say, okay, well, I understand that my wife is upset, and I understand that she had a rough childhood, or, this is all hypothetical. My wife had a very, very pleasant childhood. Maybe she had a rough childhood, and I understand that now she's taking it out on me. And people would say, okay, I understand my wife, but that's really not taking the time to have that compassion for what's going on with your partner, your spouse in that moment. And so I like your word there actually quite a bit. It's compassion is a much closer word to what we're aiming for.
Yeah, these words are connected to love, perhaps unconditional love even, Heather. Would you say that understanding and compassion are connected to unconditional love?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And I don't know, I feel like sometimes we just feel so disconnected from other people, and we feel so lonely. Like even if we're in a family or in a crowded room, we feel so isolated because we're like, does anyone even understand me? Right. And sometimes we're just grasping at straws, like, why is my spouse doing what they're doing? Why are they hurting me? Why did they do this? And we just feel so much pain. And it's not until we really get outside of that pain, or that, like, why is it happening to me? Or I don't understand them. And we really seek to, I want to understand you. And we put ourselves, like the saying goes, right? Put yourself in their shoes. But when you actually see enough of their perspective, then that is what allows you to have that compassion and be like, oh my goodness, I had no idea that is why you did what you did. If I'd known that before, man, I would have reacted so differently, and you might not even agree with what they did, or maybe the behavior still wasn't the best one or the healthiest one. And, oftentimes it's not, but at least then we can see, okay, now I can see why you did what you did. And we can extend that sense of compassion. When we have that sense of compassion, that helps us to heal our own pain about whatever happened, right? And gives them the opportunity to improve as well. Like we can say, okay, this is what happened. I can see why it happened. How can we work together on this? So I think that's a really powerful kind of formula that we can use when we're feeling like isolated. No one gets me. Why are they doing this? Is we can extend that understanding and that sense of compassion to someone else. And that allows us then to receive it in turn in our relationships.
Yeah. You made me think about communication, communicating effectively, clearly, because a lot of times this is really the case. We need to read and kind of guess what the other person is feeling. And that's sort of challenging when we are going through our own feelings. Communication, how important is that? Clear communication.
Oh, absolutely important. One of the things that we teach our clients, I talk to them about a concept that I have. We call them home messages. These are meant to be messages that you come back to frequently. They're meant to be comforting. They're meant to feel like, it's just a simple way to really define what kind of ideas you want to, how you want to define your relationship. And when I teach this concept, I talk about that very thing, this importance of communication. A lot of times we feel like, okay, we're communicating what we want or our intentions very clearly, but that's just not the case the majority of the time. And so I always teach clients with this principle that, especially when you're trying to put a relationship back together, you need to have that clarity, and you can have that by, having a very clearly defined message, and then pairing that with, something that supports that message. So, and an example of something like that is, I remember in my own marriage, we were running through a time I was going through to grad school. We had just had our third child. I was working full time, and then I had another part-time job in the evenings on top of that. We were very busy. And so my wife and I started to pull apart a bit, disconnect. And we finally sat down and we're like, okay, what is going on? I'm just not feeling that love or affection from you. And we were both surprised to hear this feedback from our partner, or from each other, because we both felt like, hey, I'm trying to add a lot into this. And what we found out is that we were both doing things to try to support and love each other, but we weren't communicating those intentions very, very well. And as soon as we started doing this, we both started seeing just how much we were both putting into the relationship, and it became so much better. When we were clearly able to define our intentions, what we were wanting, as we were, following through with those things.
Wow. Yeah, I love that. I noticed in my own relationships that it's more challenging for men to communicate their feelings. Is that really the case?
I don't want to hog things. I don't know if you want to answer that, or I can certainly answer that there.
Yeah.
So I will. I'm sorry. Were you gonna?
No, share your perspective first. Sorry.
Okay. So I, surprisingly enough, and I'm going to just confirm this with Heather, I think we get a lot of men in our program that are trying to save the marriage on their own. But I will say that yes, there is a bit of a bias there. The stereotype is somewhat true in many cases. Now, is that necessarily something that's just inherent in men? I don't think it is. I think that there's absolutely an ability to increase what I would call your emotional intelligence. Not to toot my own horn, but I think that I am a very highly emotionally intelligent male. Having to talk to people about love and relationships and feelings all day long, pretty much every day, really has heightened that skill for me. And, especially when I talk to the male clients that we have, and I give them some skills to try to express their feelings and talk to their wives about their feelings, it's like this door opens for them, and like it's just amazing the kind of all the possibilities that open up in their relationship after that.
Right. So in a way, it's a practice. Emotional intelligence is a practice, and clear communication as well.
Absolutely. From a woman's perspective, right? I do this myself, and I'm like, why can't I get him to open up? He seems so closed off, right? And it feels like there's other areas of our relationship, like the physical side, that's a lot more easy than the communicating and the feeling sharing, right? And I think a big trap that a lot of women, not every woman, because we don't want to make absolute generalizations, but a lot of women make, is that we think that men are women, and they're not. Their brains are just wired a little bit differently. And so learning as a woman or as a man how to encourage a partner to open up, and what you don't want to do, so here's what not to do, right, is we need to complain about it, to be critical of them, and just to nag or annoy about the thing that you're wanting the most, right? So if we have the expectation that they should be a woman, then we're going to be in a lot of trouble.
True.
We have the expectation that just because I ask, you're now going to give me the answer. It could also get us into a lot of trouble. So really being careful of those expectations. I really appreciate what Tony Robbins says about expectation, that expectation, if you trade your expectation for appreciation, then you change your life. I believe that's the exact quote. So we need to change some of those expectations and actually learn how to have our partner open up. And for me, that's been a process to help my husband open up. And there's a way that we go about it now that Mark teaches, and it's going to be kind of individual for every single couple. So it's kind of hard to give really general advice that's going to apply to everyone. But definitely there's some opening kind of questions that you can ask in a state of not condescending or being critical or annoyed or frustrated, more just like we want to work together as a team on this. So, what do you mean? How do you feel about that? I want to understand you. Can you explain what you meant when you said this, right? Can you share with me? I want to understand you, what your goal is here. What are you hoping to achieve, right? Those kind of opening questions really can help open up conversation, regardless of if you're a man or a woman. And they even work in the worst case scenarios that Mark and I help with, which is like when your spouse is pushing for divorce, when they're having an affair, when communication's completely closed off. A lot of people will throw their hands up in the air and be like, there's nothing I can do. And the reality is that there is absolutely some things that you can do to help open up communication and increase understanding.
I like that you came from that female perspective, Heather, because, going back to even me, even me who talks about feelings all day, I'll admit, like even my stamina for really having these deep emotional talks with my wife, she has a lot more desire for that than I do. And so, a big thing, exactly what you said there, Heather. I'll say, what Heather said, it works for men. The big reason why my wife and I will get along is she'll tell me, hey, I really need to have this discussion from you. It would mean a lot to me, rather than why don't you talk to me? Why don't you share these things? It's much more like being open about what's needed. It works so much better than having complaints and criticisms.
Yeah, it's true. Coming from the place of frustration, no doubt about it. Just to clarify, Heather, when you say appreciation, I love that, the exchange replacing expectations with appreciation. Is that that practice would be the same as gratitude, practicing gratitude?
Absolutely. And this is one of the things that I just love because it has been so healing in my life. So that saying there, trade your expectation for appreciation, applies to everything in life, but especially in our relationships. We all come with a kind of a predefined, like a set of expectations, right? Before we even get into the relationship, and our partner comes with their own set of expectations. And then we get in this thing called a relationship, and they just tend to clash and make sometimes a huge mess, and make things really challenging. And that right there, anytime we have this expectation that's not being met, it's going to cause us unhappiness, right? And anytime we feel that sense of disappointment, frustration, bitterness, anger, blaming, right? The antidote to that first has to come through what's going right in my life right now. What can I actually be grateful for about this? When we ask ourselves that question about the challenges that we're facing in our life and our relationship, then our hearts start to open up to that loving, healing energy. And we see, oh, wow, you know what? My partner is having an affair. They're in love with someone else. I'm just saying as an example here, But what can I be grateful for about this? And it's amazing when you recognize the good things in your life right now, even despite the challenges. Like in that example, I have the opportunity to look at myself and to see what I can improve about myself. And you know what? I wouldn't have done that otherwise. So I can be really grateful about that opportunity right now. I can be really grateful that I have the skills now to be able to better, navigate this going forward. Or I'm really grateful that I have this awareness so that I can seek help and I can learn from people who've gone before me, so we can just take any kind of challenge or situation in our life. And if we bring more gratitude to it, then we find more solutions and we also find more peace.
So true. I absolutely love that. That makes me think about this idea of cultivating inner strength, just becoming stronger within so we can be prepared when challenges happen of any kind, really. So let me see, my next question here is about, how is your method different from traditional counseling to save marriages?
I was actually just having a conversation about this earlier. So we run our own, promotional stuff, our own podcast and whatnot. I was doing an interview with one of our clients, and, even without asking him, he brought up this very concept himself. He was saying that, he had tried some traditional counseling and, with his wife to solve some of the marriage problems. And what ended up happening is he felt like he was, they identified a problem. The problem was he was angry. And then all that ended up happening after that was that they would rehash, they'd talk about the problems that happened during the week, and it would inevitably come back to, well, you shouldn't be so angry. Let's figure out your anger. And throughout all this, he was saying, he's like, he didn't feel heard or validated. Now, this isn't certainly not the case with everyone, but I do know, having been, knowing a little bit of the ins and outs of the system, I do know that a lot of traditional therapists might not focus in on couples work, on marriages. And so they might approach relationship problems, much like they would, say, a mood disorder or an anxiety disorder, something along those lines. And a lot of what might happen there is you might talk about how you've been feeling, throughout the week. So there is, certainly a difference in how you need to handle a relationship as opposed to a more traditional, say, mental health issue. Some of the things that we do is we really try to, I feel like we keep hitting a very similar theme, have that compassion and understanding for both partners, even if there's been some really terrible wrongs. Like if there's been an affair, hey, I want to understand why, how did you get to that place where you felt like that was something that was an option for you? And I want to really have some compassion for you. And so just labeling you as this terrible person. Now, certainly we need to hold people accountable. Absolutely. That we can't get around that if people aren't taking responsibility for their actions, but we certainly give that compassion that we suggest that they give to each other to the clients. But on top of that, a big thing that is a difference. This is coaching rather than therapy, which means that, my aim when I'm working with clients is every single time I have an encounter with them, I want to make sure that they're coming away with specific action steps that they can, go and use in their relationship. What do I need to do next to have an impact here? Even if that is, having some self-reflection. Something like, we keep hearing the feedback over and over again, but that's one of the big things that people are attracted to about our program is that we give these specific steps. And frankly, it's needed when someone is trying to navigate the relationship, and when their spouse drops this bomb saying, hey, I'm considering a divorce, it can be a very confusing time. You're not sure whether what you're doing is going to have an impact, whether it's going to have a positive impact, because a lot of times the relationship has gotten to a point where it doesn't matter what you do, your spouse might view you as doing something wrong. We certainly run into our fair share of cases like that. And so, having a little bit of that guiding hand is immensely, it feels immensely comforting for a lot of our clients, I think. And I think that's why a lot of our clients are so appreciative of what we do.
Right. Would you like to add, Heather, a comment?
I would love to add. So what we do is, I would say, radically different than traditional counseling or therapy. Like Mark said, he came from that kind of a background, and we realized it just wasn't as effective as it could be. I believe everyone has good intentions and wanting to help. So that's good. And it's always good to get some form of help rather than nothing. But like the 1 hour a week type model just was pretty ineffective for solving something of this magnitude. We are considered the ICU for marriages, and we take on the cases that other therapists and counselors say are impossible to save. So right there, we kind of throw that myth out the window, saying, if it's too late to save your marriage, if one person wants out, we also dispel the myth that it takes 2 people to save a marriage, because more often than not, if your spouse doesn't want to work on the relationship, most people will say it's too late. There's nothing you can do. But we've proven that one person can have a huge impact on the relationship, and one person can save their marriage by starting first. Eventually, it needs to be brought back into balance. But another thing that we really emphasize that a lot of other, I think, programs or courses or coaches or counselors miss is that they focus on symptoms rather than the root issues. For an example, like an affair, money problems, arguing, discussions about the children, all of those things are just symptoms of the deeper issues. And when we focus on the symptoms only, like a counselor might say, well, you're having an affair, the affair needs to just stop. And if we just end the affair, then everything will be fine in the relationship. And if they do end the affair and they're successful with that, which would be a big challenge to do, but if they did that, then another problem would crop up in its place. Because until we really address what's going on underneath the surface and what's causing the behaviors in the individuals and the behaviors in the marriage dynamic, then nothing ever really gets healed. And Mark and I, we're not about surface level healing. We're about like true inner healing for the individual, so that regardless of what happens in their relationship, they will go forward better and stronger. and deeper healing in the marriage, so that we're not just fixing the pain, we're actually fixing what causes the pain so that the pain won't come back and that you truly can be healthy and happy. So I feel like that's what differentiates us from other programs.
Sometimes I'm on the front lines. I forget that we do have a whole lot of differences here. I'm going to even add a little bit more. Even beyond, Heather mentioned the once a week sessions. We like to really give a lot of support because sometimes things can turn very quickly. So we have a group call every single day of the week, and on some days two calls where people can come in and get some support from someone from our team. Usually, quite frequently it's myself. And then even on top of that, there's a lot of skills that are just needed for a marriage to go well. So we have our own training videos and worksheets to go through. So there's a lot of support from many different angles to really tackle these difficult problems.
Yeah, I absolutely love your approach because it makes sense, and it's all about growth. When you talk about individual healing and self-knowledge, that makes so much sense to me because everything starts from that place. And then compassion, gratitude, understanding, and ultimately unconditional love. You have the keys to successful, not just relationship, but life.
Yeah, I mean, I know a lot of, I'm sorry to, I know even a lot of our clients where the marriage still ultimately ends in divorce, we still get a lot of feedback saying, what, they've learned a lot even about themselves, and they themselves feel a lot healthier. So you're absolutely right. We do touch on a lot of personal growth and self-help here, so that no matter what happens, they come out better on the other end.
Would you like to talk about the 4 proven steps of the PATH method to get your spouse back? Those are interesting components too. Perspective, adjustments, tell a new story, and hold on to hope.
Yeah. So I kind of, marketing is more of like Heather's purview. And when we come up with acronyms like this, this is just part of business. Sometimes I feel like we have to, we have some really good ideas, and we're like, okay, well, how can we actually make this a memorable thing? And so I'm just going to say to myself, I like that we have this nice acronym. It's easy to remember, but I'm going to just, poke fun at ourselves here. Like, hey, it's a bit of a mouthful in terms of an acronym, T for telling a new story. But the principles there are absolutely, they're absolutely great. They're great principles. As we've been talking throughout this whole interview here, and we've been talking a lot about compassion and understanding and perspective, and that's why we start off with that. And that's absolutely necessary to start with that understanding. So many people are so focused on themselves, so focused on their own pain, and what's needed to interrupt that cycle is they need to step out of their shoes for a moment and try to get the perspective of the other person. That's really the only way that they can draw them in. From there, there are real problems. There are absolutely real problems in many of these cases, and so there needs to be some adjustments, some action, and then Heather and I, we sat with this for quite a long time. We're like, okay, what happens when someone makes all those changes? They're absolutely nice and understanding. They have those deep conversations, and their spouse still wants to leave. And we kind of figured out that this key idea here is that story aspect, that narrative aspect, that until that the spouse starts telling a different story, things won't really turn around. And so our program addresses that. How do you help someone else adopt a new story? Once we've actually solved the problems underlying what's going on, how do you adjust that narrative for yourself and for help someone else to support a new, healthier story? And then, of course, there is the strong emphasis on hope, or working on yourself or mindset. And before I turn it back to Heather. I was just thinking about my comments earlier when I'm saying, here we have this acronym and, Heather's in charge of mark. It almost sounded to me like I wasn't appreciative of Heather's work. And I want to say Heather, absolutely does a wonderful job. She keeps us on track with many things. And so I don't know if that came out wrong at all, but I don't want that to be misunderstood at all here.
That's great. That's great. Heather, would you like to add?
Right. So for me, this was a huge transformation. It was actually a huge moment for Mark and I. So just a bit of history here of why we even came up with this, how we came up with it. Mark and I had been doing this for several years, and we'd been helping several hundred clients already. And we were seeing a lot of success with helping increase understanding, increase communication, open up communication, make those positive changes. And we realized that making positive change alone isn't enough, which is actually pretty frustrating to someone in that situation, because they're like, wow, I'm making all these changes and now you're telling me it's not enough. And like, what else do I need to do? And we really saw that there's this barrier in the other person and that they still hold on to this story. Like, if I come back to you, sure, you've made these positive changes. Maybe you stopped drinking. Maybe you stopped the affair. Maybe you stopped the arguments, the blaming, whatever, the criticism, the stonewalling, shutting me out, right? Maybe you stopped that. But if I come back to you, well, it's probably going to go back to the way that it was, right? And so we recognized that the spouse that was pulling away still had some barriers there to protect themselves, right? They're afraid to come back. They're afraid of getting hurt again. And we still hadn't quite bridged that gap until we developed this method here on how to help them change that story so that their walls of defense can come down and they can feel safe again. They can actually see the possibility of being happy together again. And that has really transformed everything. And it's super exciting because, I feel like we kind of stumbled upon it almost by accident. And a lot of people aren't even really talking about it. But this is where things start to really change in a relationship and really get exciting, because like the client that we interviewed this morning on our own podcast, it's called The Thriving Marriage, just as a little plug there for that. But
yeah,
he was saying like she had the story that she would not be happy with him. And yeah, he'd made all these changes. He stopped drinking in this case, and he was being more understanding, but she still didn't want to come back. And now her story is completely changed to the point where she's saying, I trust you. I want to work on us. I want to work together as a team. And so that's the kind of level of change that we really want to see happen there. And it's beautiful to see it happen, and absolutely can happen even if your spouse is checked out or not wanting to work on the marriage right now. So that's what the PATH method is really all about, is changing the behavior, yes, but also changing that deeper internal story, those deeper internal fears that are holding both you and your partner back, so that then you can really come together in that unified, beautiful manner.
Wow. I love your method. It makes so much sense. It makes so much sense. My last question, what are some real causes for divorce? I mean, quote unquote, real.
I can quite clearly identify that. I would say that the most common causes for this, we could say, okay, it's problems with sex or communication or whatnot. But, I think it boils down to two things. Do you have an avenue to go to your spouse and actually talk about what you want or need within the relationship? And do you have an avenue to go to your spouse and talk about problems and have them resolved? And if either of those are blocked with any amount of significance or with a long enough amount of time, the marriage is going to deteriorate, and you're going to get problems somewhere, whether that is affairs or drinking or fights or stonewalling or any number of other things. It boils down to those two avenues.
Wow. Would you like to add, Heather?
I'm just going to make a kind of a bold statement, especially in our culture today, that I believe that 95% of marriages can and actually should be saved. And I say that because our culture has become a little bit casual with the idea of marriage and relationships. And it goes back to the kind of contractual stage of marriage or the infatuation stage. It's all about me and what I'm going to get out of this. And the problem is, if we don't actually look at ourselves and solve the things that are going on within us that are causing some problems to show up in our relationships, they're going to keep showing up. They're going to show up even if this relationship ends and we go into a new relationship. That's what I discovered. I'm just going to be a little vulnerable here. But in my moment when I was considering, maybe Ben and I, we need to get a divorce. I just can't do this anymore. I can't face this anymore. I was driving down the road. I left Ben with all of our kids. He begged me not to go. And I was driving down the road, just tears streaming down my face. I'm like, I don't know what to do. I don't know how I could possibly solve this. I ended up pulling over because I couldn't see the road because I was crying so much. And I just thought, what am I doing? And in that moment, it was just like, you know what?
I'm finishing up the interview soon.
In that moment, I was just like, I could leave Ben and we could go our separate ways. We could figure out how to work it out with the kids. But I knew, like, something just deep inside me whispered, Heather, if you don't solve the real reasons why you're feeling this way, it's going to show up in the next relationship, if there's another relationship, and it's going to stay with you whether this marriage ends or not. And so those feelings for me, it was, I'm not good enough. I'm not worthy. I'm not deserving. I'll never measure up. And the people I love will always leave me. That's like the deepest level of my insecurity and those beliefs that I had. And I realized that until I resolved those, until I healed those, they were going to continue showing up. And so my encouragement is that heal those things that are inside yourself. Look at what is causing you the fear and the pain. And when you really understand where that's coming from, that it's just a story that you picked up somewhere along in your life, probably in early childhood, and you continue to give evidence to it so that it feels real, but that it's not real. It's just a story, and that story can change. And the truth for each and every single one of us is that we are deserving. I am good enough. I am worthy of love. When you get to that kind of place, then the relationship that you want to have and that you desire and that you crave, it will come to you. So that's my encouragement for everyone. Rather than going to divorce as like a quick fix to what you think is going to solve your pain, really identify where that's actually coming from and heal that first. When you heal that first, then everything else in your life will start to heal as well.
What a wonderful message. Really, really wonderful. Thank you so much, Heather. Thank you, Mark. I'll be asking you my final questions. If you knew you would die soon, meaning losing the body, would you make any changes in your life or do anything differently?
I've had to ask myself this question. And so it's a beautiful question. And I think it's honestly one that we should ask every day, right? There's that song and that story, live like you're dying, live like today's your last day on earth. And if you had that perspective in mind, then you're going to make choices that you can be at peace with. For me, it's never about perfection. I have to let that go, but it's about progress and knowing that I truly am doing the best that I can do. I believe life is precious and time is short. Family and marriage are sacred. They're divine. We are divine. And so just living true to that as much as we can is what's going to give us joy and peace and serenity in our lives.
Mark?
Yeah. You know what? I've gone through some really, really rough times in my life. And, at the time, during those moments, I would say, there's several moments where I've felt completely broken, like everything was gone, lost, and just not working well. And, looking back on it, you would think, okay, you expect one to say, okay, well, no, of course I wouldn't want to go through those things. Like I would have wanted to do things different. But, sitting here right now, having those really terrible, difficult moments in my life have really defined a lot of things for me. It's helped me to grow and it's helped me to learn a lot of lessons. I actually wouldn't be sitting here today talking to you. I wouldn't be, I wouldn't co-own, a business with Heather. I wouldn't be, doing half the things that I'm doing today if I hadn't gone through a lot of the struggles that I had. And so, oddly enough, I'm really content with most everything that I the good and the bad. And so I don't think I would do anything different, at this point in my life.
Yeah, that's a great answer. Every time I hear, yeah, I wouldn't change a thing. That's when we know we are living the life that we are supposed to live, or we are on that path to love, as you call it, Heather. And one more question. What are 3 things about life you know for sure as of today?
To 3.
Oh, just 3? There's too many? Or
Okay, well, I'll just speak from my heart without thinking about it too much. So things that I know are true. I know that I am good enough. I am worthy. I am divine. I know that each and every one of us are also that. And that when we actually find the truth of who we are, that we are a spark of divine, that's when we find peace and healing and ultimate joy in life. That's always going to be independent of circumstances. It's not about the circumstances. Things are always going to happen to us, right? But we need to be the creators of our lives. And we find our creative powers when we uncover who we really are. The second thing that I know is true is that family marriage is sacred. It is a blessed union, and it can give us so much more joy than if we're just alone. We're not meant to be here alone and isolated. We're meant to be here to be together, to create together, to be co-creators with God, with the universe, with our spouse. It's a beautiful union that we can have. And third, it's never too late to change. There is always the opportunity to make a choice. No matter how bad your circumstances feel, there's always something that you can do about it to improve the situation. And when you do that, that's when you find your power.
Oh, really great. Mark?
Yeah, no, I like the question. First off, I guess I was given a moment more to think about it than Heather was. But first off, I think the one thing that I know about life is that each of us have a lot more potential than we think we do. There's so often when we feel like we can't do something, we don't have any ability to do that. And one of the things that I've learned in life is there are a lot of people have so much more potential than they believe about themselves. Two, I think that no matter what the circumstances are, because of that potential, there's always something that can be done to improve one's circumstances. I mean, this is roughly why we've kind of formed this program, is because we're specifically targeting and trying to help people who have these really dire circumstances. They're facing a terrible moment in their life, and we want to be there to help them, which is ties directly to this. Like, no matter what's going on, there's always something that you can do to take another step moving forward, to go a little bit further, to improve your lot. And three, I feel like, even during these tough times, even if you're going through a tough time, the third thing I know about life is there's always things that you can appreciate, always things that can, where you can find joy in those little moments. Doesn't matter if, you're going through something terrible like divorce, or, possibly even worse, or, no matter what your circumstance, there's always some area to find some beauty, something to find some joy in.
Thank you so much, both of you, for your presence and for sharing your wisdom. Thank you, Heather. Thank you, Mark. Where can we find more information about you, your books, programs, course, services, and future projects?
Yeah, so our website is highthrivecoaching.com. And if you go over there, we have that free guide, like Valerie, you mentioned here, the 60-second plan to reconnect with your spouse. We also have our podcast where we share the PATH method in depth. But above all, if you really feel like you need some help and you need it fast because time is on your side, then we really encourage you to book a a complimentary consultation with us. And you can do that on the website, highthrivecoaching.com/apply. And we can share with you exactly how we can help you in your specific situation to reconnect with your spouse, to restore your marriage, and above all, to create that kind of inner healing of what's going on deeper within you so that you can truly thrive going forward.
Wonderful. Thank you so much again, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you.
Bye for now.
Bye.
Thank you for listening. To learn more about Heather Choate and Mark Johnston, please visit their website, highthrivecoaching.com.
To learn more about this podcast, please visit fitforjoy.org/podcast. I want to thank the Patreon members, Lawrence McGrath, Mark Basden, Terry Clayton, and Aidan Vickrock. Thank you again for listening, and bye for now.